Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the astrology of August 2024. Hope that you're doing well out there, having a wonderful Friday afternoon here. We're going to go on a little journey today. We're going to talk about the lunations, the new moons, the full moons, the quarter moons, the solar phases, the Mercury Cazimi, the Mercury retrograde, the ingresses of planets into new signs, out of bounds planets. We're going to talk about the decans today. Leo 2, 3, and Virgo 1, and answer your questions and just have a little bit of a hangout. So if you are joining me today, welcome, friends. Let me know where you're stopping in from. Hopefully you're having a wonderful afternoon, and yeah, we'll get to it. What's up, Tom? Nice to see you. This is Namaste, Spencer and friends. How you doing, my friend? Nice to see you. Deb Montgomery is here from the Big Island in Hawaii. What's up, Deb? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Rachel Fletcher is stopping in from Roanoke, Virginia. I love the little bee hearts there. Nice to see you, Rachel. Ani is here. Says, Southern Oregon, we're still on fire. Oh, my goodness, Ani. Well, hope that you're staying safe and that the rain will find you soon. Mortal Wild, Carol's here. What's up, Carol? Says, well, how about that for good timing? I literally just sat down with supper after being in the garden all day and sewing. Nice. That sounds like a good afternoon. That sounds like very relaxing and peaceful, so I'm glad to hear that you're having a good day. Sergey is here from Chesapeake, Virginia. Nice to see you, Sergey. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Stephen the Jupiterian is stopping in, says, welcome to our new timeline. Hello, all happy Friday. Yeah, this is an interesting timeline, isn't it? Excuse me. Jennifer is here from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Nice to see you, Jennifer. Raven is stopping in from sunny Kansas. Oh my goodness, all the friends are here today. Nice to see all of you. So honored that you're spending your Friday afternoon with me. I know you have a lot of options for how you might spend your time, but it is so wonderful and makes me feel good that you're all here today. So thank you for that. Let's see. Oh, we got a couple more people stopping in. Jennifer's gonna have their birthday on the full moon. Okay, happy birthday, early birthday, Jennifer. Born in 62, gonna be 62. Is that kind of a golden birthday of some sort? Maybe it is. Tarja is here from Finland. We had thunderstorms today in Finland. We got our Finnish friends stopping. We got Tarja from Finland. Susanna is from Finland. Nice to see both of you. Hope you're doing well over there across the pond. It's nice that you're joining us here today in the evening hours over in your neck of the woods. All right, friends. So let's get to it. What do you say? So we're talking about not July. We're talking about the astrology of August today. Of August 2024. There we go. So, a couple announcements though before we dive into all of that. As we are apt to do, we just have to do a little sales pitches here before we get started. So forgive me for that, if you will. So if you're new here, welcome. My name is Spencer, and I'm a professional astrologer, and I would love to work with you. So if you are enjoying the analysis that you hear today, and you would like more help with your own journey, with your own story, with your own natal chart, understanding things, go check me out at spencermichaud.com. I do readings, I do natal readings, I do transit readings, I answer individual questions, and I do tutoring. So check me out, spencermichaud.com. Click on the Book Now button, and I would love to work with you. Also having a Leo season sale, my friends. We're going to talk about the decans of Leo today. And I started the Decans of Leo sale a few days early, so check that out at the store button at spencermichaud.com. You have a couple more days to pick up the Decans of Cancer for 20% off if you missed that, so last couple days of that. But we're going to be talking Leo today. These are great opportunities to learn about the different 10-degree sections of the zodiac, so go check that out. Also have a magical musical partner, Tanya Andrews, who has a magical business called Third Coast Mojo. And she has been cooking up some really amazing stuff, including this Exalted Mars and Capricorn offering that you can find on her Etsy account, Third Coast Mojo. She does great work. She takes a lot of pride in the work that she does. All of these oils are magically elected to be able to draw down the energy of certain planets to help enhance your experience of life and sometimes to mitigate some of the challenges you might have in your own chart or that you might be going through with a certain period of time. So check her out, Third Coast Mojo. And then finally, you can buy me a super chat or a coffee today if you are interested in supporting the show. You can buy a super chat with a little $ in the YouTube chat today, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and donate that way as well. Appreciate all of you and all of your generosity. Okay, so those are the announcements we have for today. We'll see if any more friends are stopping in. Tracy Chaplin stopping in. What's up, Tracy? Nice to see you, friend. Hope you're doing well. Steven says, I need a calming presence at the moment. Thanks for filling that for me, Spencer. I'm going to do my best today, Steven. I've had a little bit of a long week, as I'm sure many of you have. It seems like there's been some things happening since we talked last, isn't there? I don't have any good, super great advice on all of that. But if you're looking for an attempt to bring peace and to try to put some good out into the world, that's something that a value that we hold on this channel. We hold a value of getting along with each other and appreciating our differences and things of that nature. So that's what I can offer for you today. But as far as being able to solve some of the challenges of the globe at the moment, America and otherwise, it's tough. We're going to have to live through those changes together. We'll talk about a little bit of it today with the Astrology of August, because there's some pretty big transits coming up in August, friends. And there's a couple really big days, and we'll make the connections with some of the stories that are playing out publicly and politically, etc. But what I do ask, though, is that if you want to participate on the channel, in the group here, just be kind to one another. We're all human beings here, and we're all trying to live out our respective experiences. And I think it's really important for us to stay dignified and stay graceful, even if we're not seeing that in people that we disagree with. We can always choose to make a different choice in that moment. Doesn't mean we're justifying people's behavior that we disagree with. It just means that we're trying to put the type of energy and experience that we want to see out into the world. So I'm a firm believer in that, and I hope that as a group we can do that today and moving forward. Raven says, I'm cleaning and organizing my closets. A good chore for Venus Day. I need to do that, Raven. I'll tell you what, I'm feeling the cluttered thinking of Jupiter and Gemini recently. I've had so many different projects and decisions, a lot of choices. I don't know about you, but that's been my experience of Jupiter and Gemini so far, is an enormous expansion of options and directions I could go, and these different projects I'd like to do, and all this new information I'm trying to process. And this week in particular, it's been really overwhelming. And I think when we get to those moments, I think, Raven, you're doing the right thing. Just getting our physical spaces organized can help organize our minds, because as within, so without, as above, so below. And I really do feel like when we organize our physical spaces, we start to think a little clearer. And that's a good action that you can do when we feel overwhelmed or powerless, is just getting rid of some stuff. And that in turn is going to help us process some other things too. I have some emails I need to get to too. I know some of you in the community have been emailing me, some with just your generosity, and I haven't been able to respond yet, and I apologize for that, but I've just been kind of working through a lot of different things, and I'm doing my best to manage all of it. But I appreciate all of you, especially those of you who are reaching out to me and are being so generous with your time and resources, etc. Okay. Yeah, Ani says the Mars-Uranus Algol hangover. That was a doozy, wasn't it? We had a lot going on with Mars and Uranus on Algol. Of course, we did see some violence play out on the national stage, some political violence, and I hope that in participating in these live streams and being able to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally, that you were able to keep your centeredness and your equilibrium, even while other people might have been, quote unquote, losing their heads, etc. I think it's super important to stay centered in crisis times, and especially when we feel a lot of anxiety and nervousness about what's going on in the collective. We can make a much better decision in the moment if we are staying on track in that regard. Ani says, I think we're getting some relief when Mars goes into Gemini soon. I would agree. I'm looking forward to that. Mars is my time lord, and I'm looking forward to some dignity improvement for sure. Yeah, we've got Mars-Jupiter conjunction coming up on the 13th and 14th, Steven says. We'll cover that for sure. Deb says, we'll overcome. Spirit provided a flash we needed to smell our stink. Maybe so. Yeah, definitely seeing, I think that world events can definitely unearth some of the things and challenges that we need to work through as a collective. We are in the Mercury shadow period, Jennifer says. Absolutely. Sergey says, given everything that has happened over the last week, I'm very happy to report that the Mars-Uranus algal aspect did not affect me much personally despite being on my Chiron. Sergey, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, anytime we can look at what seems to be a challenging aspect, and Mars-Uranus algal is one that astrologers, universally on some level have acknowledged could be very challenging. And when we see the not worst case scenario play out, that's the reason for celebration, whether it's in our personal lives or as a collective. So I'm glad to hear that, friend. And that's something to keep in mind too. Even though we try to prepare ourselves for challenging experiences, sometimes the worst case doesn't play out. And I think that is something that we can take solace in sometimes. All right. Raven says, yes, I'm very relating to that very much. Lots of decisions and big conversations going on in my life, so the organization of physical space is needed. Yep, Raven, we are on the wavelength, friend. And happy late birthday to you as well, one of my birthday buddies. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's something I'm looking forward to doing this weekend after the live stream and have some free time, is just organizing the space and trying to wrap my head around just how to manage all of the new input that's coming in. Painted Turtle says, curious if anyone caught this. Am I the only one who saw the North Node conjunct Irakis, literally the right ear of the king? That's interesting. I don't know much about Irakis. Is that an asteroid? But that I would find that astrology is often very literal. So it would not surprise me to see things like asteroids or things like that speaking to the moment that we are experiencing collectively. Okay, so friends, such good discussions here. Let's keep going. Let's talk about some big picture thoughts for August. So we've got a number of Uranus squares coming up again. We're going to be seeing Venus squaring Uranus. The Sun's going to square Uranus from Leo. We're going to have Mercury squaring Uranus a couple times. Okay, this is something that's really fascinating to see because we have a Mercury retrograde period. We're going to have, 2 to 3 hits of that all within about a month or two span period in direct motion and in retrograde motion. So probably some more surprises to come. I think that, we won't get completely caught unaware if we prepare ourselves mentally with astrology and with our self-care practices and things of that nature. But Uranus still is a wild card, and it still can bring us some things like, I thought that something might happen, but I didn't see that happening. So those are moments we could experience potentially. Of course, we will have Mercury retrograde in August. That's going to be happening on the 5th, so we'll take a look at that. And then, we've got a really big day on the 19th of August. There is a full moon that day. There is a number of squares with planets, and I believe it's also the day of the Democratic National Convention starting. So some really interesting connection with world leaders, especially with people in the Democratic Party as well. So something to keep an eye on for sure. The astrology is pretty spicy around that period of time. One thing I also will say that we are experiencing is we're going to see a Mercury cazimi that's going to be coming up. We also have Jupiter in malefic enclosure, and that is always something I like to keep my eye on. So a malefic enclosure is when the planet Mars and Saturn are making an aspect to a planet that is sort of keeping it prisoner on some level. And we're going to see that happening between August 7th and August the 14th, when the Sun will sextile Jupiter and it will stop breaking up the malefic enclosure. So that's when it begins officially. And then it ends when Mars actually makes the conjunction with Jupiter on the 14th at 16 degrees of Gemini. That will end exactly with a square to Saturn retrograde. So we'll try to break that down, but there might be some frustrating periods in August There could be some times where we feel like things aren't moving forward as quickly as we would hope for. Maybe we feel a little bit of paralysis due to all these options that we've been exploring with Jupiter and Gemini. But I'll try to contextualize that for you more as we go along. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Let me get some things going here. I'm just checking in with the chat here. Oh yeah. Jennifer's talking about the jets going over. We live in the same area, Jennifer and I, and there's an air show this weekend. Thunder over Michigan. It's really, I find it very annoying, but it's very loud. And last year, one of the MiG-28s or something actually crashed into an apartment complex. So I'm just not sure why they keep doing these things, but to each his own. What's up, D? Nice to see you, D. Haven't talked to you in a while, bud. It's nice to see you here today. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Okay. So let's keep going, and we will figure this all out together. And I'm going to add a few more notes to our screen here. Okay. Forgive me for some of the having to do things in the moment this week. It is a challenging. Sometimes we have weeks where we're able to manage all of the things in our life, and sometimes we're just kind of doing our best in the moment. That's been one of the weeks I've had recently. I've had a lot of things going on that have taken some precedence and priority. So let's go over the lunation details. So we have a new moon on August the 4th at 12 degrees of Leo. We have a first quarter moon on the 12th of August at 20 degrees of Scorpio. We have that full moon that I was alluding to on the 19th at 27 degrees of Aquarius. And then we have a last quarter moon at on the 26th at 3 degrees of Gemini, squaring the Virgo sun. So those are our lunar phases. Of course, new moons are new beginnings. First quarters seem to be challenges of trying to manifest something or bring something into being. Full moons, flowering, awarenesses, clarity, but sometimes challenge, opposition. And then the last quarter, we're maybe having some kind of existential crisis or of some sort. That's a little bit too harsh of a way of describing it sometimes. It can feel like that. But last quarters can also be just something where we're starting to try to let go of things to be able to prepare for the new cycle. We have a number of ingresses this month. Ingresses are fancy words. That's a fancy word for a planet moving into a new sign. On the 4th, we have Venus moving into Virgo. It's fall, a challenging place for Venus. We've been enjoying Venus in Leo, which doesn't necessarily have any special dignity in Leo, but it's not really debilitated either. But when it gets into Virgo, it's in a place that it is not very comfortable. Generally, Venus likes to bring things together, and Virgo likes to separate things out into categories, and that can be a little bit uncomfortable for Our Lady Venus. On the 14th, Mercury will retrograde back into Leo. So we'll talk about Mercury stationing retrograde in Virgo, but then it'll change back into Leo on the 14th. The sun will move into Virgo on the 22nd of August, okay? And beginning the final season of summer, or the final sign of summer, I guess you could say. And then we have Venus improving her condition on the 29th of August, moving into her domicile of Libra. So that should be some relief if we're having some difficulty with Venus topics in our life, relationships, our desires, how we create harmony with others, coming to consensus and agreement. That could be much improved by the end of the month. Let's talk a little bit about solar phases. Solar phases are when a planet either conjoins the sun or has a station, retrograde, or direct, or emerges as a morning or an evening star. So these are important things to keep an eye on for really a lot of clarity moments. I think the sun is a light bringer. And sometimes when we have clarity about a situation, we're bringing clarity to the topics ruled by that specific planet. So on the 5th of August, we have Mercury stationing retrograde at 4 degrees of Virgo. Okay. Mercury will be in its own sign and exaltation, its own domicile and exaltation. So it does have a lot of dignity, but we might be reviewing ways that we teach, ways that we learn, maybe more knowledge that we need to acquire potentially. We'll have Mercury retrograding under the beams of the sun on the 9th of August at 3 degrees of Virgo. So this is something where we're seeing Mercury heading into the underworld, or in a position where Mercury is guiding the souls to the afterlife as a psychopomp, I would say. That's a fancy word for the guide of souls of the dead. The way that I've experienced this in practical terms is it's a good time to go inside your own experience, to look to yourself for knowledge that has been buried or something like that, and getting some realizations about things in your life through deep reflection. It's not necessarily through an external realization or event. It's something where you're revisiting something that you've always had within you, or from your past potentially, or from your roots, or from your historical experiences with others. We will have Mercury Cazimi conjoining the sun at 26 degrees of Leo after Mercury is retrograded back into Leo on the 18th, right before that big day that we were talking about, the 19th full moon and squares. I believe we have a Jupiter-Saturn square on that day, and then there's a Venus-Saturn opposition that's happening that day as well. Mercury will station direct at 21 degrees of Leo on the 28th of August, and then emerge as the morning star on the 29th at the same degree. We have a couple out-of-bounds planets this month as well. We have just the moon is going to be out of bounds actually, but the 3 moments of that. So the moon will be out of bounds from August 1st to the 3rd, from August 13th to the 18th, and from August 25th to the 30th. So this is something to keep in mind, especially when it comes with your physical experience, your memory, your body, etc. Not sure if the moon is exactly out of bounds right at this moment, but I believe it will be for the full moon that's happening in Capricorn, potentially. So we will take a look at that, the out-of-bounds planets throughout the month of August as well. And I'm just kind of getting this up on the screen here. Okay. So let me check back in with the chat and see how you all are doing. Those are sort of our 30,000-foot view types of things to keep an eye on. Let's see. Honey says, loud flight show annoyance, very Mars Uranus. Yeah, feels like it sometimes, right? Yeah, I'm definitely prayers for the pilots and for the people who live nearby, myself included. Like, I'm probably like 5 or 6 miles away from the airport that they do this at. So I'm just hoping that everything works out and we don't have the same type of accident that we had last year. Dawn is here. It says, hi, everyone from Mobile, Alabama. Nice to see you, Dawn. Hope you're doing well. Devin's here. What's up, Devin? Says, Venus on the 29th feels like Gandalf at dusk of the 29th. Look to the west and see Venus shining in all her glory. Yeah. Venus on the 29th degree of Leo on Regulus, right? If I'm not mistaken. Very close to Regulus. When does that happen? That is on the 3rd or so, right? So we'll have to break that down too. That happens shortly after the Venus-Uranus square as well. Ani says 8-5 in my location, moon perfecting Mercury when it goes retrograde feels like a special time to have a misunderstanding and hurt feelings. I hope not, Ani, but knowing that our communication might be slowing down and may not be as effective as it normally might be, it's good to really get clarity with things and not make assumptions in our communications. Sergey says, sounds like nothing specific is happening on my birthday of 8/8. Oh, happy birthday, Sergey. There's a few things, nothing on that particular day, but there is the Venus-Mercury retrograde conjunction shortly before that. And then Mercury will be going under the sun's beams after that. But Yeah, it's always nice when we'll have a quiet, peaceful birthday, right? Okay, so friends, let's start out by just taking a look at the sun's period through Leo 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the decans of Leo and just show you that what kind of themes we might be trying to work through in the beginning of the month of August. I think this is important to kind of understand what the sun might be shining a spotlight on. I believe by this time we will be still in the midst of the Olympic Games, so that's something that will be we'll be in the middle of it, I guess. Those things will be playing out on the collective stage. But you can see here the Six of Wands represents someone who is returning victorious from a battle, from an engagement, and he's surrounded by his friends and family, and he has the laurel of victory. It's called the Lord of Victory. Austin Cobbett calls it a crown of laurels. Susie Chang calls it your moment in the sun. So this might be something where we're feeling like we are hungry for validation. Maybe we're receiving some of that validation. So victory parades and public honors. King for a day, the vir triumphus, the man of triumph. It is related to Tiferet in the Kabbalistic tree of life, which represents balance. And if we look at Leo representing the heart, maybe we have a balanced heart, balanced passions potentially. This decan is also related to the victory of becoming our authentic self. I really do think that the journey of Leo is about authenticity. How can you become an external expression of who you really are and what you really feel on the inside? And that's not always easy to do. We have a lot of pressures sometimes in our life not to be ourselves. We have family pressure. We have expectations of others, of our community, peer pressure. Sometimes our relationships force us into roles that are uncomfortable for us. Sometimes just the place and the way that we were born or where we were born puts pressure on us. And I think that it is heroic to become more of who you truly are and to feel comfortable expressing that, whether it's publicly or with your community. So this could be a theme that we might be working through when Leo is, the second decan of Leo is active as the solar journey. So a sense of belonging and appreciation, validation and recognition. What I found as a Leo 3 ascendant native is that validation is tricky, and becoming attached to it can be a recipe for emotional slavery. And I think that it is important, if you want to have independence and freedom of thought, of action, of movement, to not be so attached to it. I think this is something that Leo learns over time, as when we start to detach from needing to please everyone all the time, I think our lives start to function a little bit better. And honestly, one of the hallmarks of one of the fixed stars in Leo Regulus, right, that we were alluding to earlier, it kind of grants the ability to sort of detach from what others think. And in doing so, you actually gain their respect. I think that's one of the kind of the weird paradoxes about Leo sometimes, is sometimes when we're not pursuing validation, that's when we actually receive it. So something to consider for our Leo friends out there. So some questions you could ask yourself the first week or two of August when we're going through the second decan of Leo. Who or what do you want to be celebrated for? Understanding where you stand and what your beliefs are and what your values are super important. And it's very difficult to receive the respect and validation of others if you aren't validating and respecting yourself. I think that's really an important realization to come to about that as well, is if you don't believe it in your heart, how can you get others on board with that vision or whatever it is? How can you share and uplift others through your success? That's an interesting thing with this decan. I think part of the challenge of the second decan of Leo is how do you manage when you are successful, when you have had a victory? Do you gloat and lord it over others, which can cause them to turn on you? Or do you share the spoils of victory with others? Are you generous with your victory? Are you generous with your success, whether materially, emotionally, intellectually, etc.? Are you graceful? Are you staying humble? Those are things that will be important as we move forward through this decan as well. How can you make the work more important than your ego? That's a good one. I often tell the story of a friend I have, a Scorpio friend, of course, it's a Scorpio friend, reading us to filth, right? When I was learning how to become a singer, I was doing a lot of mimicking of my favorite singers. I really enjoyed the stylings of guys like Jeff Buckley and Robert Plant and things like that. And I was experimenting with my head voice and with, just ascending to the heights of a tenor type voice. And my friend was like, I feel like when you're singing like that, you're trying to impress others versus expressing the meaning in the song. And I was like, oh, that's a really difficult but good realization. And that really changed a lot of the way I approached singing. Is I wanted to figure out how I could express the feelings in the song that would help my audience connect with it rather than just impress them with my skill. So how can we do this in other facets of our life? How can we do what is necessary in service of the project and the work that we're doing rather than getting the approval of others? Can you make yourself a channel rather than the source? It's very important if you have Leo placements or if you're dealing with Leo transits, that we don't mistake ourselves as the only source. I think that we are co-creating with the universe. We are channels for this divine energy that wants to move through us. But when we start to think of ourselves as the center of the universe, as the source of all things, that's when we fall prey to some difficult megalomaniacal tendencies here in these signs. So we have to be careful of that. Where does your character still need cultivation? I mean, we can always work on ourselves on some level. I think that we are in process, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then finally, question you can ask is, whom does the Grail serve? Whom does the Grail serve? Now, what does that mean? That's in reference to a story that I read in The Astrology of Fate by Liz Green, when she talked about Leo and Leo archetypes and the story of Parsifal, the knight. And, he basically has to go help this ailing king, the Fisher King. And he finally finds this Fisher King, and he is asking the wrong questions in the beginning that are more, I would say, self-serving. And then finally he goes and he has to go through the process all over again and mature, etc. And then he's asking, whom does the Grail serve? Like, where, instead of saying, how can I benefit from this? How can I use my talents and abilities to serve others? And I think it's a really beautiful story and an important one for Leo. Oh, Ani, thank you for the super sticker, my friend. I appreciate you. Thank you for your generosity. Appreciate you. Let's see. Just looking through the chats again here. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely some interesting connections with those asteroids and the current events and things of that nature. I'm going to keep rolling here because we'll be here for 4 hours if I get on too many tangents, and I'm trying to manage myself and my own attention today. But I keep the comments coming. If you have questions too, I'd be happy to answer those, and especially if they're specifically about the universal transits. I do enjoy answering personal questions as well, but oftentimes it's better to reach out for a reading with how the planets might affect your chart personally, or I usually do a Q&A once a month for each season, and in those I answer questions that are more personally focused as well. Okay, so let's bring up the screen and let's have a look at what we're experiencing with this Leo energy. So here we see the 1st of August, and of course the moon is going to be out of bounds from the 1st through the 3rd. And what we're seeing really in the beginning of the month here, before our new moon in Leo, we have a balsamic moon phase. So we're going to start off the month probably a little bit tired, probably tying up loose ends, etc. But we're going to be seeing the perfection of Venus squaring Uranus. So that's our first major aspect of the month. So here's Venus, here's Uranus, both at about 26 degrees, 27, 26 degrees of Leo and Taurus, respectively. Those degrees are very important for August. The full moon will be at 27 degrees of Leo Sun, Aquarius Moon, 27 degrees Aquarius Moon. The number of our political leaders have planets at these various degrees of fixed signs. Joe Biden has the Sun and Venus at 27 degrees of Scorpio. So he's having a lot of these things activated by these squares and oppositions. Kamala Harris has Saturn at 28 degrees of Aquarius. So these are affecting her on some level. Donald Trump has Mars at about 26 degrees of Leo. So these aspects are going to be affecting him. So these major players in American politics have very important natal placements at these degrees where we're seeing these squares. So, a lot of shakeups, a lot of challenging experiences that are going to be happening along the way. Okay, let me keep rolling on here. So Venus and Uranus, we could have some surprises when it comes to specifically to the Taurus and Libra topics in our life, because that is what Venus is providing resources for. We could have some really surprising desires that come up. Maybe we have some difficult relationship conversations. Maybe we desire to make a purchase that we normally would never consider. This is something I've been working on this week. I've been really getting into figuring out how to power my home with solar panels. And when I get focused on a project like that, like everything else falls away. It's like there's just so much information and options to understand. And we were doing research on solar batteries and backup batteries and powering them with solar panels and things of that nature. We were looking into what are they called? Mini splits for mini split heat pumps, where you can actually have air conditioning and heat that's powered by a solar panel on your roof, which would be really cool. But think about how your desires might be changing. Think about where you might be wanting something, but it is there might be some unexpected things where you push the button and you say, oh, okay, I've got to do this now. I would be careful of that, though, because it could have some unexpected consequences. The other thing that I will say, if you get in conversations with partners and about relationships, these degrees of Leo, the final degrees of Leo, a lot of it has to do with defending a belief system that you are very passionate about. And with Leo 3 squaring Taurus 3, some of our passionate beliefs the hills that we defend, right? They might be running into forces that are greater than ourselves. And Taurus 3 is often associated with forces of nature, with evaluating or reevaluating the tangible results of our efforts over time. And we may have to make some changes. We may have to make some changes in the beliefs that we are utilizing to help create harmony with each other. Okay? This is something we've seen in the collective recently, the challenge of rhetoric and how that can contribute to violent rhetoric in political conversations, and how that can contribute to violence in the collective. And we've seen some changes around the way that the narrative has been presented because of that. And it's just very fascinating to see the changes that we're going through as a collective based on some of these kind of unexpected events. So that's our Venus Uranus square at the beginning of the month. Let's keep going. Really, the next kind of big thing that we're seeing is the new moon. So that brings us to the new moon. And this is at 12 degrees of Leo. As Devin was alluding to earlier, Venus will be at that 29 degrees of Leo, which is a fixed star, near a fixed star called Regulus. I believe it's precessed into Virgo at this point, but it's close enough that I would say that I would read it as conjoining Regulus. This is an interesting new moon. As Devin was pointing out, maybe this is somebody coming along to the rescue. Maybe it is, like Gandalf coming over the hill at Helm's Deep, right? When we've got our backs against the wall, and then there's just something that's going to be coming over the hill to help out on some level. In this silly game that I've been playing, the Lord of the Rings based card game, Gandalf's a really powerful ally that when you plunk him down on the table, he can take care of a lot of problems for you. And then as soon as he comes, he leaves, which is really, he leaves the game. And it's very much like Gandalf. He'll come in and fix a problem, and then he'll pop off somewhere else because he's needed somewhere else. And that's really fascinating, a fascinating way to read Venus at 29 Leo, because maybe we will have some assistance that comes through that at this new moon. But then just as quickly as we had that resolution, Venus will leave into its fall. So its dignity will be challenged. So we may have something that comes along but we might not be able to count on it permanently as a solution. It might get us out of a sticky situation, but then we've got some hard work that's coming with Venus moving through Virgo. Oh, let's see. Tracy says, what does the U.S. have at this degree? I seem to remember something. Tracy, which degree are you referring to? 29 Leo? I'll have to get clarification on that. Yeah, we've got some people asking about Mars ingressing into Gemini through the 7th house. I'll talk about Mars and Gemini in a little bit here, so we'll get to that. Carol says, I've got an Anchor Solix F1200. Yeah, Anchor is a good company for solar batteries. That was one I was looking at. Without going too far down the rabbit hole, Carol, I was looking at Anchor, EcoFlow, and like Blue Eddy. Those are various brands of solar battery that I was looking into. Okay. Sun transits my Rahu in Leo. Megalomaniacal note made. Oh no. Ani, well, same here. I have North Node in Leo. So I sometimes have to watch those tendencies too of getting a little bit puffed up or inflated. And yeah, if we just know that it's coming, we can manage ourselves a little bit, right? Good way to kick off August. Yes, Ani says 7:31 for sure. Okay, we've got some really nice comments about people talking about how these are affecting their personal charts. But I'm going to keep going here, friends, so that we can kind of get through the month in a timely fashion. So we're talking about this new moon. I don't see any real negative placements for the malefic planets. Saturn's in aversion. Mars is sextile. Jupiter is sextile. We've got Mercury not making an aspect, but very well dignified, but slowing down and stationing. So I think that this new moon, there could be, we're preparing for some kind of reversal, especially related to the Virgo topics in your life and the Gemini topics in your life. So the easiest way to look at this in your own chart is to say, what traditional topics do the houses that those signs are on represent? In this, arbitrary Leo rising chart, Virgo rules the second house of resources, money, what supports you. And the 11th house of groups, money from the government, friends and alliances that you share beliefs with. So those two things are interconnected, and they could be up for review when Mercury stations retrograde. So there's always going to be two topics tied together unless we're talking about the Leo or Cancer topics. So great way to break things down, especially with dignity. I think it's super important because when a planet changes dignity, those topics either get smoother in our life or get more difficult. So, for example, we may have a really beautiful moment with Venus ruling Taurus and Libra topics in our life, but then those topics might get a little bit more challenging as Venus moves into Virgo. So an easy exercise to do with your chart. If you need help with that and understanding which planets rule the chart, the houses in your chart, the best thing to do is reach out for a reading at spencermichaud.com. Happy birthday, Deb, to you on the 12th with Venus in Virgo, 4 degrees. That'll be a celebratory time. Okay, so that's our new moon. Again, the last hurrah for Venus. Mercury about to station retrograde the next day. Not terrible aspects from the malefics, but we might be coming off of the shock of Venus-Uranus square. Okay? Okay. So then the next day, we do have Mercury stationing retrograde on the 5th. And this is, you can see here on my program, Astro Gold, Mercury is now represented with red numbers instead of black. So that's an easy way to understand if a planet is retrograde or direct in this particular program, is if it's red or black. So Mercury retrograde in Virgo. I think this one is potentially not one to be super afraid of, upset about. I personally have Mercury retrograde in my natal chart. And one thing I find is that sometimes when Mercury stations retrograde, it just seems like everyone is on my wavelength. Like communication somehow becomes easier. People become a little bit more reflective. And I find it easier to get thoughts from my head to my mouth. Now, that might not be true for everyone. There could still be delays. There could be things that were given that are taken back. There could be reevaluations that are happening. But I don't think it's as big of a tragedy as we make it to be, especially if Mercury is dignified. I think that if Mercury was in Pisces or Sagittarius, signs of its exile and fall, I think that usually those periods are more confusing. Details get flubbed a little bit more. I think with Mercury in Virgo retrograde, it may be easier to catch details before they really become a problem, if that makes sense. And I think that with Venus, ingressing into Virgo that same day, right? Shortly, but really the day before it's going to ingress. Okay, and Venus is ingressing into Virgo on the late hours of the 4th. Now we have Venus coming together with Mercury retrograde. And even though Venus isn't as comfortable in Virgo, I do think that because it is co-present with Mercury, its ruler, and coming together, I think we can have some conversations that start smoothing things out. And I think, as Raven was talking about earlier, sometimes it really helps to get organized and to purge our spaces, purge our brains. And I think that when we have Venus and Mercury in Virgo, I think it's going to allow us the capability to work through some of the challenges we will experience from from Jupiter and Mars moving through Gemini. Okay. I think that when we have Jupiter and Gemini in particular, we just get an influx of information. When Mars is moving through Gemini, we may have some conversations and some communication styles that could be spicy. And as I've said a number of times, that my favorite metaphor for dealing with Gemini and Virgo squares is breathing. You breathe in the information with the with the Gemini experience. And then you exhale after you've taken the oxygen out of that air. You exhale the carbon dioxide and you return the rest of it to be circulated once again. I think it's really important to realize with Mars and Jupiter and Gemini is that all the information that you're receiving isn't always useful. Some of it is. Doesn't mean that none of it is. It just means that some things you're going to incorporate into your life and you're going to infuse those ideas into a body, a physical form. And some of it is just superfluous. Some of it needs to be released and returned. So I think that the Venus-Mercury conjunction is going to help us do that. That's going to happen on the 7th. But I do think that this is going to help us to understand what materials, knowledge, etc., that we're still missing that we may need to pursue. I will show you the decans of Virgo later on in the broadcast, but really that specific 10-degree section of Virgo is related to working hard at your craft, being able to sit down and do the hard work necessary to become a better version of whatever you're trying to do or be. It is associated with apprenticeship. So this might be a good time to sign up for a class or something of that nature. I'm working right now too on offerings for the fall. Little birdie chirping today, thinking about redoing the Decan walk starting in September or so. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I've had a really nice time going on this Decan walk with the group that I have, and we have a lot of interest in doing it again. So if that is of interest to you, reach out and we'll try to start working on that with you. Okay, so a couple dates to keep in mind with this Mercury retrograde cycle. It's going to retrograde on the 5th. It is going to move under the beams on the 9th and then station direct on the 28th. It emerges as the morning star on the 29th. So that's part of this whole story that's going to play out. All right, if we go to the 7th here, that's when we have that Venus-Mercury conjunction coming together. And I think that the important thing to realize with Venus moving through Virgo is we have to be very careful about being overly critical to our partners, to ourselves, to our artistic creations. One of the things that has really stood out to me as a creative person, currently or in the past, is it's very important to allow yourself space to play a little bit before you turn on your inner or external editor. I think this could be a time period with Venus and Mercury coming together where that internal critic, or externalized version of it, could be speaking really loud about an awareness of flaws. Oftentimes the beginning decan of a sign shows us what we're missing so that we can go through the process to acquire it, balance it out, let it go, etc. I think what the first decan of Virgo shows us sometimes is the skill and the knowledge that we may feel we are missing. And then we go through the process of learning and developing and working on our craft throughout it. But with Venus here, Venus often shows us that the path towards harmony is acceptance of another's point of view, acceptance of our flaws with Venus's exaltation in Pisces. I mean, think about with Venus and Virgo. One example I've always liked is someone cooking a meal. And let's say we've got a Venus and Pisces individual in the moment, in the kitchen, or Venus and Taurus, whatever dignified Venus you want to call it. And they're just in the flow state. They're in the moment. They're not necessarily following a recipe. They're just putting a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Maybe they've had some experience. They're trusting their instincts, and it's starting to go well. and it smells good, and they're letting it simmer. And then the Venus Virgo comes in and says, well, how much of this did you put? Did you put this amount in? Like, oh, let's add this. Are you following the recipe? And breaks them completely out of the flow state through criticism, through paying attention to what is wrong with the recipe rather than what is right. I think it's very easy for Venus and Virgo to focus on what is flawed in something rather than what we appreciate. Now, the Virgo tendency of identifying flaws is not necessarily a bad thing. We have to have the ability to identify flaws in things, especially in regards to the season in the Northern Hemisphere that Virgo was related to, the harvest season. The ability to identify if something has a flaw in it and will subsequently rot will help us to preserve the things that are of good quality. This is something that we don't hear enough with Virgo. Virgo is equally as good at identifying something of quality rather than something that is of poor quality or flawed. So I do think that one of the things that you might be able to use this Mercury retrograde Venus conjunction for is to be able to identify what something of quality is in your life. It could be showing you how far you have to go, but it could really be a moment that says, well, this is something that's important to me. This is a quality I want to develop. And now I have to be patient and go through the process to develop that skill set through practical, tangible hard work. One of the challenges of Gemini is we have a lot of ideas about things. It's an air sign. It is hard to keep it tangible and practical. It's hard to contain. Virgo is much better at that. It says, let's focus on this small part of it, do it to its highest potential, the best of our ability, and then that will let us integrate that into some kind of physical form. The journey in Virgo often is about taking spiritual essence or ideas and infusing it into a body to be able to pass it on as a legacy to others, to preserve it for the winter, to pass it on through teaching others. So this could be a legacy moment where you are identifying what is good and what needs work. My advice to you with this, though, is be gentle with others and yourself if you identify the gap, I guess I will say. That's one of my favorite quotes from a guy named Ira Glass. And he talks about the gap between where we feel we are and where we want to be as creative people. And he says that the way to close the gap, okay, because the gap can be very painful. The way to close that gap between our lived reality and where we want to be creatively is just to do a lot of work, do an enormous amount of work, and you will start to close that gap little by little, okay, through repetition. Now, I have an insight for you about that gap. It is never fully complete. It is always a moving target. Just when you feel like you've reached the moment of like, yeah, I finally got this, the bar tends to jump further away. Okay, I'm telling you this as a Virgo stellium, as a Jupiter Virgo 1. I have Jupiter in this decan. It's exile, right? I have Saturn and Mars in the third decan of Virgo. That bar keeps changing. I've experienced this this is in my second house, like natally as a Leo ascendant. I experienced this when I am going through a process like we were talking about earlier with Carol, about trying to purchase a solar system for my house. I do an enormous amount of research when it comes to, the more expensive a purchase is, the more research and the more anxiety I have around the purchase, because I've tried to be fairly frugal with my resources because I value my freedom. I'm a firm believer that money equals time, and I love my free time, and I'm not in a hurry to trade my time for something that isn't exactly what I need, like on some level. And it can be very frustrating to go through a process with limited resources and try to figure out what will best serve the goal that you are doing. And I will say that that moving bar, the gap between your reality and your ideal, it's tough because you'll make a decision and then you're like, well, what about this, this, and this? I often second guess my decisions, especially when it comes to purchasing things. And I've talked about this on the channel before too. So this isn't the first thing that we've experienced this, but I do think it's really important to have a point, especially with this Virgo energy, to say this is good enough. This is I am good enough. This thing is good enough. This will serve the purpose it was intended to serve. Like maybe it's not the newest model. Maybe it's not the biggest, highest capacity solar battery. Maybe it's not a Tesla wall or something bullshit like that. I mean, this is like those systems. You want to run your whole house on solar power backup, like they're very expensive. But maybe you can find, in my own case, something that if there's an emergency, you can power your refrigerator for a few days. You won't be completely without your internet. Okay, like these are the kind of things that is saying, how can we find the right tool for the job, the right amount of editing, the right amount of creative process, and then letting it go. Because we can drive ourselves to the brink of insanity constantly trying to refine something. And I think that this moment with Mercury retrograde and Venus coming together, it will behoove us to say, you know what? You're good enough. This project is good enough. Yes, we have some things that we could improve on. Yes, we have a little bit of a gap, but there will always be that gap between. That is really the nature of the divine versus the physical manifestation. The ideal, the platonic ideal of something versus the actual variety of form. The other thing I will say about this, and thank you for the compliment, Painted Turtle, says all this Virgo wisdom is gold, Spencer. I appreciate that. I've lived the highs and lows of a Virgo type experience, so this is just coming from experience. I will say that the other part of Virgo, I gotta collect my thoughts again. I had an interesting thought around it, and then I lost it. Well, anyway, it's important not to strive for perfection. That's what I wanted to say. There is a concept in Japanese art. It's called wabi-sabi. And it is basically the idea that nature, the imperfection of nature, quote unquote, or the beauty of nature should be allowed to complete the final 10% of the artistic project that you're working on. Think about a table. Instead of having, 4 square sides, there is one that's just left the natural wood, and how beautiful that can be. I really have had to learn to embrace that as a person who struggles sometimes with this challenge. So try to embrace and leave the last 10% for nature to beautify. Just say, you know what, I'm giving it to you now. I've done as much as I can in this human, spacesuit, and I'm leaving it to the universe to complete. Okay, so that is Venus conjoining Mercury retrograde, some Virgo reflections, etc. Let's keep moving on. All right, let me check on my notes here. That really gets us to the end of the sun in Leo 2. So what we should do now, let's just take a little stretch break. Check in with the chat here. Do me a huge favor, if you can. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want to make a donation, you can buy a super chat or go buy me a coffee if that is something that you are able or feel inspired to do. I always appreciate it. Subscribe to the newsletter. That's a great way to understand when I'm going to be going live, to see new classes and offerings, new sales, etc., to keep in touch with things like Third Coast Mojo as well. You can find that in the description of this video or this podcast. All right. Jennifer says, Aries rising mother with packed Gemini house was always critical of me, but made me realize how much I could aim for. Yeah. I think that Gemini is not immune to criticism. It is, again, another Mercury-ruled house. And I think that Mercury in general, according to Robert Schmidt, likes to disrupt things on some level. It likes to destabilize things. It casts things into doubt. It questions. And Gemini asks just as many questions as Virgo does. Gemini asks a lot of questions of, well, what other possibilities are there? Where Virgo says, well, how can we eliminate some of these possibilities so that we can actually get the work done? And it can be equally as frustrating if you have a negative Gemini type influence in your life, where they're saying, well, you could be this or you could be that, rather than if you have a negative Virgo presence in your life, well, it says, well, you aren't doing this good enough, etc. So it can be equally painful. So I hope that you're able to appreciate yourself, Jennifer, and not fall victim to that conditioning. Stephen hit the like button. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate you. All right, take care, Stephen. We'll catch you next week too, and we'll be here for a little bit longer doing the astrology. But appreciate you being here, friend. Yeah, have a great weekend. Okay. All right. So, friends, we've got our stretch break, right? Let's keep on rolling along. What do you say? Let's talk about the Sun in Leo 3. And before we do that, let's take a look at our decan of Leo 3. Here we see the Seven of Wands, where we have someone who is defending his position. He has attained his position of authenticity, and now he is people are trying to knock him off of his podium, his hill, etc. This is Donald Trump's rising sign. So this is like, we saw this in the collective, like someone literally trying to take him down from his elevated position at that point in time. I also have this decan as my rising sign, and that is something I've experienced in the past as well, is having to defend my right to be. So this is it represents martial tendencies as well, though. So it is a Mars ruled decan. So we can think about it as this very passionate but sometimes aggressive energy as well. Courage, bravery, desperate measures. It often can represent courage under fire, like when you're experiencing something that is a crisis and your back is against the wall. You're tapping into some kind of thing, and it's for better or for worse. And I am by no means an endorser or supporter of this person, but there was a lot of I guess theater involved in that, and I don't mean that as a conspiracy theory. I mean that as more of just he understood the moment, and he understood how to turn it into something that was memorable, and it's fascinating to see how Leo responds when the spotlight is on them, whether they're scared or not. Like, I have experienced this as a musician on a much smaller scale, a different environment, is the lead up to performance can be just as anxiety and angst producing as anyone else. But the moment that spotlight flips on, the moment the camera's on, the moment, this is the same thing with these live streams. Sometimes I give a lot of anxiety preparing for them and over prepare. It was the same when I was a musician. I would practice and practice and practice, but the moment that mic turned on, it's just like a switch flipped, and I gave myself over to the moment and started relying on instinct. And that really is I think a lot of the essence of Leo 3 is where can your instincts kick in when you're trying to figure out what's really important to you? How do you navigate challenging moments sometimes? And I think that it can be also something where we are having to really dive into the depths of our emotional resources. So defending your right to be an unbreakable will. It's another thing that I've had to tap into. There have been some difficult experiences that I've had where my will was tested, where they said, are you really willing to go the distance with this? And I was, for the most part. And I think that we have to be careful about how far we're willing to go in this decan, though, because one thing that this decan doesn't do very well is acknowledge when it's time to step down from their position of power. We've seen this with Donald Trump. He fervently has defended his position throughout all of this, course of history, refusing to acknowledge the results of an election. I experienced this as a parent, like this. I have a I have a Leo 3 rising daughter, and you can imagine some of the ego clashes that might have happened as she was trying to individuate as a late teenager, young adult. And we really had to give each other some grace. And it was bumpy sometimes. And sometimes it's still bumpy, And I think that understanding when it is time to stay and when it is time to go, and when it is time to let go is very important in this decan, in this period of time. And this full moon that we're going to experience in this decan of Leo, with the sun in Leo and the moon in the decan of Aquarius opposing it, really a lot of the questions we're going to be answering often have to do with, should I stay or should I go? Do I need to defend this position, or do I need to just, become more objective? It's a very subjective place, and our objectivity is something that we could utilize to balance it out. Netzach and Atziluth, that is the sphere of life that is really, it's related to your values. It's a Venus ruled decan. So knowing your why will help you to understand how much energy you need to access. Fighting your way out of a corner. We talked about Helm's Deep earlier, and then Gandalf coming over the hill to rescue them. But what do you do when your back is against the wall? How can you dig deep for victory? Spirit pushing past the natural limits of the body. This one's really important. As an athlete, as a young person, I've said this a number of times too, but I'm not the tallest, not the strongest, not the most talented. I'm about 5'11", 155 pounds or so. So you can imagine that I wasn't the biggest dude, but I had a spirit or a willpower that was my superpower as an athlete. Is I just tried so much harder than my peers, to the point where I experienced a lot of injuries as an athlete. Like I just couldn't stop myself. And I was a hockey player. I got injured a lot playing hockey, and I got in trouble a lot as a kid because it was really hard for me to understand that other people weren't as competitive as me, and I was very vocal about it. If someone wasn't skating hard, I would get on their case, and eventually some of my teammates would get fed up with me, and they were pretty cruel to me. It was a humbling experience on some level, but I had experience here's just an example, Leo 3 example. I was a basketball player as well, and I hadn't played organized basketball pretty much my entire life. I played in one YMCA rec league when I was 7, but I played a lot of pickup games with my friends. And I would go out and do a lot of the dirty work. I wasn't very tall, didn't weigh a lot, but I would just go. I couldn't shoot to save my life or dribble, and at that time, I got much better in college actually. Uh, but I'd go out and I'd grab every single rebound that I could get, and I would play really inspired defense. I'd be really a pest, and I would end up getting like 20 or 30 rebounds in these like pickup games in gym class. People started picking me first because they're like, well, Spencer's going to go crazy in this game and he's going to pass us the ball and we're winning, And somebody started encouraging me, like, you should try out for the basketball team. This was during in between my junior and senior year. And I actually grew about 4 inches that summer. So I went from like 5'6" to like 5'11" in one summer. And they're like, you should try for the basketball team. So I did. I thought that would be fun. And I just went nuts. I kind of rootied my way onto the basketball team. I just was a hound on defense, and I would try to get every loose ball and throw my body wherever it would go. And at the end of the tryout, the coach brought me aside and says, look, Spencer, you don't have any idea what you're doing out there. You don't know any of the plays. Like, you have no experience. But, man, I really appreciate your effort, and you make people better through that spirit. And it's your choice. If you're never going to play, but if you want to be on the team and you want to be in the practices and things like that, like, you can, and it's your choice. And I said, hell yeah, I'll do that. I got in a couple games. I scored 1 point, and I think I made the people around me better through that spirit. And it's something I always think of as a kind of a defining moment in my life. Of the odds were so ridiculously long to do something like that. And if any of you have seen the movie Rudy, it's a beautiful example of someone who isn't going to give up when people keep telling them no. It's just through this effort that they have at least some kind of success and are inspiring to others. So I hope that this period of time will help you to find where you need to dig deep for your courage, your spirit fire, etc. So what personal ideals are worth defending? What will you do when your back is against the wall? What reserves of inner strength can you draw upon? And how can you maintain the will to carry on? Is it time to stand your ground or time to concede the throne? What inspires you, your faith in the times of darkness? Now, just to bring some balance to that previous story that I had, keep myself humble. After the success of that, I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then in true 12th house sun fashion, I kind of self-sabotaged a little bit. And I was 17 years old, and I had we didn't win very many games as that year. I wasn't playing that much, and I wasn't contributing to a lot of that, but we actually did win a game, and we went to a party. The basketball team did, and there was this really, really pretty girl that I was infatuated with that was filling coffee mugs up with hard alcohol, and I had no experience with any of that. And in my dumb 17-year-old self, I drank about 3 of those coffee mugs in about 20 minutes. It was vodka, and ended up in the hospital. This was a 6-house perfection year. I ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning, couldn't remember anything, and then got suspended for the rest of the season because they took that thing pretty seriously in very conservative Holland, Michigan, and got suspended for the first half of my senior baseball season and got like a minor in possession ticket. It was an experience, and it turned me off to like drinking for probably the rest of my life because I knew it was I knew it was dangerous, and I almost died. And so that to me is the most Leo rising, sun in the 12th house success, but it's you're probably gonna screw it up somehow. But it was a learning experience. I don't regret it, because honestly, that experience, I think, saved me from a lot of challenging experiences I could have had moving forward from that moment. It was a wake up call, and I don't regret that. I think that I'm very fortunate that I survived that, but I think I learned from it, and I have not had a problem with things like alcohol in my adult life, and I'm grateful for that experience for that. I know that I have compassion for people who are struggling with those things. So we're all on a different journey, but I thought it would be interesting to share a moment of triumph, but then bring it back down to earth a little bit. Oh, Sergey says, "Oh man, I think a lot of us had those blackout drunk stories from high school." Yeah, I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it by any means, and I just didn't really know any better, and I hadn't had any experience with it, and I just feel very, very fortunate that I survived it. So, that being said, let's talk about the astrology associated with that. So here we're back to the chart, and I guess the final thing with that story is I ended up in the same hospital room as the announcer of the basketball team, who had had a heart attack the same night. And that's how everyone found out that I had that experience, is because the announcer was like, "Oh, is that Spencer from the basketball team in the hospital bed next to me getting his stomach pumped?" Like, yeah, embarrassing. And I had to go the next day to my coach and be like, "I'm not feeling so good, coach. I don't think I'm going to make it to practice today." My dad sent me there. He was like, "You're going to go tell him." He was like, "You're going to tell him that you're not going to be there because you committed to that, and like you need to do that." And oh man, it was, what a humbling experience that was. Okay, so we've got in Leo 3, the first thing that we're kind of working through on the 12th is a first quarter moon at 20 degrees of Scorpio. So let's go to the time when the sun is actually in the first decan. So you can see here now it's in 20 degrees of Leo, and the moon at that first quarter square is going to be about 20 degrees. So there's the square. Now, again, first quarter moons are sort of crisis moments. They are moments where we're trying to bring something into manifestation. We get the impulse. The sun is infusing a sense of purpose into the moon at the new moon. So we at that new moon in Leo, we may be infused with a desire to receive validation, right? Because it was in Leo too. We want the victory. We want the acknowledgement. But we hit a crisis moment here a little bit with the first quarter moon in Scorpio. So this is a time where to be able to defend our beliefs, we have to be careful not to get blinded by idealizing old forms. The third decan of Scorpio tends to be related to trying to glamorize a form that will no longer bring us vitality. And they call it the Lord of Debauchery, where the longer we hang on to something dead and refuse to liberate the final essence from its form, the more and more dark-sided things we can do in defense of that dying life force. And I have found that to navigate this decan successfully, accepting what needs to be let go of will help us to find the freedom we need to move forward. Remember, the transition from Scorpio 3 to Sagittarius 1 is like speed and movement, liberation of spirit to find a new goal, to find a new form. So I do think that, especially with the moon in its fall, we really are probably going to have an awareness of the frailties or the frailness of a body, of a form that we're trying to keep propped up. again, unfortunately, like the the president in the United States has been showing some signs of age, and this could be another moment where we get more of those types of signals around it. Um, I don't know how to navigate all that. I think it's sad. I think that we need to respect people as they age, and I think that people have value at every stage of their life. But I do know that that job is really, really stressful and really tough. And I've watched really, I think, decent people age significantly trying to manage all of that. And I just think it's a lot for people to work through. And we'll see what happens with all of it. But um, it's not an easy job. And I think it can accelerate the, I don't know, the stress of that job can accelerate your aging. I would say that we saw this with, like, if you see pictures of like for example, like Barack Obama from beginning of his term till the end of his term, it's like, man, that dude has seen some stuff, you know. And I guess the same could go, be said for Joe Biden as well. So, in our own lives, though, how do we identify where maybe we're hanging on a little bit too long, and we need to let go of something so that we can liberate spirit fire for the next stage of the cycle? So that's the first part of Leo 3 around August the 12th. We also, the next day, we're going to see the moon moving out of bounds, and that is going to kind of give us I think we're going to feel a little bit wrung out after this first quarter moon. Like the moon out of bounds is pushing our bodies to extremes emotionally, physically, etc. And as we see that happening, Mars is going to be coming together with Jupiter. So let's look at that on the screen here. So here's Mars Jupiter on the 13th and 14th. Okay. So this is, oops, I'm just going forward by hours. There we go. So there is the Mars Jupiter conjunction. And Mars Jupiter coming together in Gemini. Let's talk about that, because that is an interesting one. Before I dive into that, Painted Turtle has a question. Currently trying to work with the last balsamic moon. Any informative moon book recommendations? I really like Demetra George's work on moon phases, so I would pursue her books. And Dane Rud, she pulls from Dane Rudyar. She also has a moon book about, I believe, about the balsamic phase. I don't remember exactly the name of it, but it is sort of like the dark moon or something like that. But look up Demetra George for that. That would be my recommendation. But let's talk about Mars and Jupiter coming together. And they're coming together on a fixed star called Rigel at 16 degrees of Gemini. What I didn't mention before this, that I should back up, I'm sorry that I missed this, but I alluded to this at the beginning of the broadcast, but I want to show you that when we have this sextile, okay, right here, the sextile of the Sun and Jupiter on the 7th, that puts us at the beginning of a malefic enclosure. Because look, we've got Mars on one side of Jupiter and Saturn casting its ray. So Saturn is casting its ray on this side of Jupiter. Mars is enclosing it via its bodily conjunction. And there's no planet that is casting its ray in between it to break it up after the Sun moves out of that relationship. Beforehand, the Sun was sending a sextile ray that was helping to break that up. But from August 7th to the 14th, we have Jupiter being enclosed by those malefics. So again, this could be a really difficult time for not only just Jupiter significations in general, where we might feel a little bit stuck with our options in the Gemini topic in our life, but it also is going to have reverberations to the Pisces and Sagittarius topics in our life. So because those two topics and signs are ruled by Jupiter. So keep an eye on that. It's not that long. It's about a week, okay? But sometimes those malefic enclosures can feel really frustrating. That decan of Gemini is related to the Nine of Swords, where we see this anxiety, where we're just up at night, weighing options into the night. I am familiar with this energy, having Venus in this decan. Just sometimes it's hard to shut our brains off, and this could be a real challenge around that. Stellar Rendition, it says Mysteries of the Dark Moon by Demetra George. Thank you, Stellar Rendition. Absolutely, that is the one. Great book. Talks a lot about balsamic moon phases. She is the goat when it comes to some of that material. And a fellow Leo rising and Leo sun. She's an example of a Leo sun and rising powered by a Leo sun. Man, I love me some Demetra George. One of my favorite astrologers. Just love her scholarship, and just a cool person too. I got to meet her at UAC, and she was just very kind and gracious. Jennifer's asking, what is a good mitigation for that enclosure? That's a good question, Jennifer. I think that my first instinct to deal with a Jupiter malefic enclosure in Gemini second decan is to, first of all, be comfortable with not knowing the answer. There are some periods in our lives where we don't have all the information that we need to make a final decision. And I think exploring and allowing ourselves to explore within reason is one way to mitigate this. To say, okay, I don't have all the answers yet. I need to be comfortable with the ambiguity. I would say the second part about that is not overthinking this, right? Not overthinking it. Say, you know what? I don't have to know everything about this right now. I don't have to figure this paradox out, because a lot of the anxiety you see in the second decan of Gemini is through irreconcilable pulling directions, where you say, I just can't possibly do these things. And we see it resolved in the third decan of Gemini, where one twin has to die before the other, so that the other can live. If you think about the journey of Castor and Pollux with Gemini, one of the twins, the mortal twin, dies in a fight with another set of twins, and the other immortal twin, I believe Pollux, sometimes I get them mixed up. I think Castor's the mortal one, Pollux is the immortal one. Pollux has to give up some of his immortality so that Castor can live again. They exchange time on Mount Olympus and in the underworld. So he lives for a certain period of time, and then he goes and dies again, etc. So there will have to be a time where we have to let go of some of the options that we're trying to juggle and make a choice, so that we can breathe life into what wants to live. Just like we talked about the transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius, the transition from Gemini to Cancer speaks to letting go of the exploratory, having to keep every option open, to moving into, I have chosen this priority. This is what's most important for me to nurture and to support and to protect and to help it grow into its full form. So I think that's two ways of going about the Jupiter malefic enclosure. I like this. So Tarya says, thank you for the heads up, Jupiter enclosure. Absolutely, Tarya. Natatataful. Yeah, nice. That's a cool Natatataful. That's a great name. Nice to see you here. Ani says, Jupiter malefic enclosure makes me think of the song Don't Worry, Be Happy to mitigate it. Purposefully divert and channel racing thoughts. Only pick one. I like that. You know, there's only so much we can do as when we're trying to figure something out. And if you think about what the Saturn part of the malefic enclosure is saying, is that sometimes we have to surrender to a divine plan that is better than our plan, right? We may want to take action with Mars in Gemini 2. That's actually the decan of Gemini 2 is ruled by Mars. So sometimes we may feel like we just can't harmonize these two things. But Saturn is in the overcoming square to both of these things. So Saturn says, probably try to think less about it, right? Just go about your business. The universe has got this one. You don't have to have it all figured out, even though you may feel like you need to gather more and more information. You'll eventually come to the point of diminishing returns. So I hope that would be my helpful advice on that. And yes, Ani, don't worry, be happy, right? This song I wrote. That was one of my dad's favorite albums, was that Bobby McFerrin album that came off of. And that song, it's a great song, but he is for those of you who don't know anything beyond that one song, Bobby McFerrin is one talented dude. I mean, he did everything with his voice. Like, he was just like this incredible mimic that would do like Flight of the Bumblebee with just his voice, just these operatic classical arrangements. And it's worth checking out some of his other material as well. Tom says, I'm not sure I see the malefic enclosure with Mars behind Jupiter. So Tom, so Saturn is casting its square ray on the one side of Jupiter, okay, at 18 degrees. And then Mars is on the other side in degrees before Jupiter. So that's how we're seeing it enclosed here. So I hope that was I hope that's helpful. Ani says, I like the idea of letting go as a ritual. Saturn is throwing a day overcoming square, absolutely. A ray by overcoming square, yep. It's a Matt sandwich by aspect, yep, exactly. A Mars sandwich, yep. Hold on. Okay, Tom's got it now. Good. Okay. Jennifer say, yes, when I can't decide, I throw my hands up and let what happens happens. And sometimes that's the best thing. Sometimes that's the thing that we can do, right? It's in the spirit's realm. Yeah, Jupiter sandwich. Excellent. Jupiter is the meat in the sandwich. Mars and Saturn are the bread. Okay, let's keep going. So that is an interesting thing to keep in mind as we get into the third decan of Leo, because this is going to break up this, because now Saturn is still in that overcoming square to Jupiter, but now Mars isn't sandwiching Jupiter in, but it is coming into its own square with Saturn. So I don't know how much relief we're going to get, but at least Jupiter will start to not, feel so paralyzed. So Mars and Jupiter conjoining on Rigel. I think we really covered a significant portion of what this could bring us. We may feel like we are just drinking from a fire hose of information, and that could feel really overwhelming. It could produce some anxiety. It could lead to us feeling just anxious to the point where we can't stop the internal chatter. But I do think once we start moving off of the malefic enclosure, that could start settling down. Now, when we get to the 16th, that's when our Mars-Saturn square perfects. So there's Mars. Let's get rid of that. I didn't want that one. So here's Mars. We have Saturn and Mars at about 17 degrees. Now, Mars-Saturn aspects, those are frustrating. I would say that's the first word that comes to mind when I think about Mars and Saturn aspects. In this case, Saturn is in the overcoming square, which means that from the center position of the chart, looking to the right, the planet on the right, looking out, okay, from the center, has an advantage over the planet to the left of center, okay? And that's because of primary and secondary motion and how those two interact. They said that ancient astrologers think that the planet in the overcoming square has some sort of ability to exert power over the planet that it's being, squaring. Now, what does that mean to us? Well, it means that Saturn's in charge here. It means that understanding what Saturn is requiring will help us to work through and mitigate this challenge. Mars wants to take action on ideas in Gemini. It wants to fight. It wants to contest. It wants to argue, right? Saturn says, slow down. Slow down. Don't overestimate your abilities. The divine has a better plan than you do. Don't overthink it. Don't keep pursuing more and more information at all costs, etc. It's going to be important to slow down and respect your limitations and the limitations of the situation. So we can think of having the 1 foot on the gas, Mars, and 1 foot on the brakes, Saturn. And I think trusting our hearts over our heads may also be something important. How do we find meaning in what we are exploring? Saturn says, yeah, a lot of information is great, but what does it mean? How do you integrate it into your life? Is it actually supporting your spiritual growth? Or is it just a distraction? So this might be something where we're trying to eliminate some distractions in our life for sure. You can also see that, Venus is about to oppose all this. This is our buildup. This weekend of the 16th through the 18th is our buildup to the full moon. So energy is increasing around this period of time, okay? And we're going to feel the frustration of not being able to maybe move forward as quickly as we want, slowing down, trusting in the divine plan. We've got Venus and Virgo, which is, in its fall, which is maybe encouraging us to find flaws in things and to be dissatisfied. Then we talked about that earlier with our Virgo reflections. And then here we got, as we move forward over the weekend, we are also seeing our square starting to perfect from Mercury retrograde to Uranus and preparing us for a Mercury cazimi on the 18th. So here's the 18th, and here we have Mercury cazimi, Uranus squaring Uranus, getting us almost T squared with the moon waxing to a full moon in Aquarius. The full moon won't happen until the next day, but we're going to start feeling it here for sure. So this Mercury-Uranus square is going to revisit the events of this upcoming weekend, the 21st of July, okay? So I want you to pay attention to the Mercury-Uranus square that you're experiencing within the next 2 days. And if there are some shocking communications that you're experiencing, if you have a wild hair, you probably are going to have to revisit that in the middle of August. And there will be a future revisiting of this Mercury-Uranus square on the 7th of September when Mercury is direct again. So keep in mind, if you're listening to this after the fact, this weekend that I'm referring to is the full moon in Capricorn 3. So we may have some shocking communications during the full moon in Capricorn 3 that we will have to revisit with potentially more clarity at the Mercury cazimi on August the 18th. That generally what Mercury cazimis do, or cazimis of any planet tend to do, is bring us awareness. That planet is becoming renewed in the heart of the sun. The shock that we might have is we may be getting a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of spiritual fire that says, this is what I believe in, and this is what I'm willing to go to battle over. This is what I'm willing to defend that's important to me. This is the authenticity I'm willing to defend. So I want you to really pay attention to what comes at this Mercury Cazimi on Sunday the 18th and say, what am I willing to go the distance for? What am I willing to dig deep for courage? What thing in my life or purpose or relationship or project am I willing to be rooty over, that I won't give up on it no matter what or how many people tell me it's impossible? No matter how many people say you're too small, you're too dumb, whatever it is. Like, what is it that you just will not accept and give up on? Now, when you have an awareness of that, the full moon's going to come to say, well, that's what you may want, but here's the reality. Here is an objective perspective on that, okay? We may be really passionate about something that we want to defend, but we've got this full moon coming. And we also have some things that are out of our control. I can't say this enough about Uranus and Taurus 3. There are certain things that are out of our control, and we need to find the humility to accept them. Okay, and that is what Uranus and Taurus 3 is saying. I've said it in reference to things like climate change. I've said it in reference to like accidents that happen that weren't in our control. I've said it in reference to like remedying mistakes from our past that have been come to our awareness, maybe through doing something rash. The story I told about like ending up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning earlier, you know, that caused a lot of reevaluation of my past actions. And for those of you joining late, like it was from high school, so nothing recent. I'm fine. It was just a seminal high school moment of overdoing it at a party and it being very instructive and humbling. Okay, we got some new friends. Rachel's here. What's up, Rachel? Good evening, everyone. A late check-in from cool, rainy, but lovely Ireland. Hope everyone is doing well to begin this full moon weekend. I hope you're doing well, Rachel. Jennifer says, can it relate back to when Mars and Saturn were conjunct not too long ago? Well, in what degrees? And when was that? I'd have to think about that in context. Rachel says, oh yes, just communicating amongst yourselves. Okay. So let's think about what happens the day after this. So just to contextualize, so many squares. Mercury squared Uranus. Mercury is Cazimi of the sun. Mars is squared Saturn. Venus is squared Jupiter. Okay, like this day is wild. To me, this day is, let's look at this day. So here is the full moon at 27 degrees of Aquarius. And I'll do a whole another live stream on this at some point. But holy cow, all the aspects at once. And again, I will remind you that just doing a very cursory check on the current events of the day, this is the start of the Democratic National Convention, right? The Democratic Party's convention. So here is, look at this. This is just fascinating to me to see all these aspects. So here's Venus squaring Jupiter and Mars. Okay, Venus opposing Saturn. All of these squaring Saturn here. This big old T square. And the moon squaring Uranus. For those of you who missed the earlier reflections on this, Joe Biden, the presumptive nominee, has Venus and the sun at about 28 degrees, 27, 28 degrees of Scorpio. So all of these planets are going to be squaring his natal sun and Venus. Kamala Harris, as vice president, has Saturn at 28 degrees of Aquarius. So her Saturn is going to be activated. Jupiter is moving towards her ascendant. She has an ascendant in Gemini. But it's being squared by Saturn right now. Like, so slowing down ambitions on some level. There's so many aspects here that parsing it all out is going to be an exercise in seeing how we're going to be pulled in a number of different directions. Okay. Painted Turtle says, I love when you give a thread to follow with date, Spencer. It's always helpful. Note for me. Oh, good. I'm glad that's being useful for you. I'm trying to label things as much as I can on the channel when we're talking about aspects. I have a few less labels today than normal, but I'm doing my best. So let's think about this big old T-square. It's in mutable signs. So we've got the opposition of the sun and Mercury to the moon, okay, which brings themes of what are we going to defend? Defending our position of power versus letting go. That's been the biggest conversation in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks since that debate is, should Joe Biden stay in the race or should he move aside and move on? Well, him staying in the race is a manifestation of Leo 3. He's defending his position. Him leaving the race would be a manifestation of the moon in Aquarius 3, moving on, letting go, moving down off of a position. It's squaring Uranus. Like, there's some factor involved that nobody really thought about. Like, right now, he has COVID. So that is a factor that is greater than, is a force of nature that's greater than him right now. We have this mutable T-square with Venus in the second decan of Virgo, potentially finding flaws in a process, opposing Saturn in Pisces, and the other thing to consider is that Venus is going to be on Joe Biden's midheaven at that time as well. His midheaven is 17 or 18 degrees of Virgo. But remember, I also told you that we had Jupiter in malefic enclosure. Well, guess what the ruler of Joe Biden's ascendant is? It's Sagittarius. So his health might be a factor in this as well. Like, the first house rules the body. It's obviously a factor with just like age and etc., but it might be even further a factor with like how he recovers from COVID or how that's affecting him moving forward as well. He may want to stay as much as he wants, but the universe may have other designs potentially. So Venus opposing Saturn, wanting to continue to work, but Saturn telling us not to overestimate our abilities. And then the squares to Gemini, just the confusion of what would happen next if something were to change and to shift, and the options that we would have to explore as a community. It's a lot. Yeah. And Sunny D is saying that's the United States moon degree. Which is their moon degree? I don't have the United States chart up right away, but if you could put that in the chat, Sunny D, that would help me contextualize that. But that's interesting too, because this is a really consequential moment for our country, this 19th of August, and for the world. You know, I think that I try to be as much of a global citizen as I can, but there is no denying that our actions do affect other people, other countries, etc. And just as other countries' actions affect us. So we're all one Earth here on some level. Heather is here. Says, this is the full moon double T-square on the 19th. That is my solar return. Oh my goodness, Heather. The crazy has already begun with Mars-Uranus conjunction last Monday, which squares my 27 degrees Leo sun and a trip to the hospital. Oh, Heather, I'm sorry. I am sorry, friend. I hope that you're recovering well and that, you know, that you find good health and vitality once again. Sunny D says 27 degrees, 10 minutes is Aquarius is the USA moon. Oh my goodness. So this is a full moon for America, right? This is the American full moon. I believe that America's the Sibley chart or whatnot is Sag rising also. So if you think about not only as the ruler of Joe Biden's first house in malefic enclosure, but America's first house is in malefic enclosure for that period of time as well. And then we get, you know, an eighth house full moon, potentially, if I'm thinking about correctly, just off the top of my head. Oh, well, buckle up, friends. It's going to get interesting. I will say, for me, my hope with this period of time, geopolitically, etc., I just hope that whatever direction we're heading as a community, that we're able to do it peacefully. I've never been a fan of violence, rhetoric, riling people up. It's just not something that I endorse. And I hope that we can find ways to unite, you know? And it's tough. It's super tough because there's so much division. And it seems that we're so polarized in the ways that we're, believing and trying, and the actions that are happening. And it's tough because there are a lot of difficult things going on that need to be remedied, that are corrupt and that are challenging. But at the end of the day, man, on some level, just as speaking as an American, we're all like Americans here. But even speaking as a global citizen, we're all children of the earth, and wouldn't it be great just to have some kind of agreement with one another so that we could continue living on this planet, peacefully and in relationship with it. I tend to see politics as something that is, I try to take a 30,000 foot view with it. I try to take a view of what is best for the earth, not what is best for one or other political party. What is best for the earth? I'm really concerned about where we're going with that in mind. That's the value that I always ask. I'm really concerned about deregulating pollution and corporations and things like that. That's concerning to me. I'm really concerned about people using fossil fuels continuously when it's proven that that's puts a lot of stress on our climate and on our environment. I'm concerned about people dumping things into our rivers and our oceans and things of that nature. I'm concerned about our ecosystems seeing mass extinctions and biodiversity slowly shrinking away. So I don't, honestly, and I hate to be crass, but I don't give a fuck which one of these people becomes our leader. But whoever is going to support the earth, that's who I support. Whoever's going to help extend the life of our species on this planet, that's who I support. I don't give a shit about the rest of it, That to me is what is important. And honestly, when those types of decisions are made, it's so much easier to make all of the other decisions. If you deal with things like climate change, you won't have as much of the mass migration that could happen with climate things, with people are all up in arms about immigration in our country. And first of all, and I won't go too far down my soapbox, but we're a country of immigrants. My goodness, that's kind of what America is ostensibly built on. So that's one thing that I can't wrap my head around. People getting upset about that. Number two, I think that when we deal with climate awareness and climate resiliency and make decisions based on that, we will have more abundance to go around. There won't be a need to hoard resources or to battle over water or food, because we're working in tandem with the abundance that is possible when you're living in synchronicity with a planet. So whatever happens at this very pivotal moment in August, I just hope that those are the things that are motivating the decisions. And do I think that our leadership right now is doing that? It would be hard to say that it is. I think just Western civilization in general is having some real struggles learning how to live in balance and homeostasis and equilibrium with the earth. And there's a reckoning for all of us that live in Europe, you live in America, live in Finland, live in Australia, whoever's listening to this. If you live in a developed country, you're having these questions right now, and you're having these things play out in your local environment. And if you live in a country that is quote unquote less developed, you're dealing with these issues of the countries that have consolidated a lot of the resources from those countries, and the fallout there is even more immediate. So as we move into an election cycle in America and in the world, I would say the divisive, distracting topics should always come back to this one issue. And if you're going to go out and vote, which I highly recommend that you do, I would vote with that on your mind, and that in your heart, and that in your consciousness. And that's what I'll say about that. I feel like Forrest Gump, and that's all I have to say about that. Angela says, as a European, it's really fascinating to see the astrology unfolding in your country as well as here. I live in France. Oh my goodness, Angela. So you have had some really tumultuous moments over there too. So yeah, definitely reflective of some of the astrological forces. Stellar Rendition says, if and when you can, check out the documentary The Grab. I will. It sounds like one that examines maybe oligarchical resource consolidation potentially. I'm sure it's interesting. I'll check it out. Currently studying Aquarius moon personalities, Painted Turtle says, a doozy so far. I love a few high vibe examples, as the one I'm finding are very pop culture, but the US moon being this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, America's an interesting country. Cancer sun, Aquarius moon. There's a lot of like, this is our family, but our family is universal. Like, family is from all over. People are trying to come here, and like, I mean, that's really when America's at its best. I think when we treat everyone like family, in the best possible way, rather than saying, "Oh, you're not part of our family." Like, how can we think about America as the backyard barbecue where everyone's invited? It's a potluck. It's you bring a dish. You bring a dish. And you get a plate, you get as much as you need, and then you go. And you don't want the billionaires coming in and say, well, I'm going to take like every single plate, and I'm going to hoard this over here, and like, well, you guys can all fight for these 2 plates over there. Or saying, oh, well, you can't come because your dish is smaller than someone else's. Like, come on. We're all friends here. I think that's when we can be at our best as Americans, is taking care of each other, but appreciating our differences and the universality around it. Don says, unfortunately and sadly, I don't think either side gives a cent about those concerns, and that's the most concerning. Yep, I agree. I think that it's not being focused on enough, and there will be heavy, heavy consequences that I am not looking forward to because of that thinking, that short-sighted thinking. And as astrologers, we try to see the long term. So I think that my work as an astrologer, I think, has helped inform some of that thinking as well. And my work thinking about how generations beyond me are affected by my decisions. Like that is the thing. I'm reading a really amazing book that I highly recommend called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is an indigenous botanist, an American indigenous botanist. And that whole concept of leaving the earth a better place than you found it is super important. And we're just not doing that with the urgency that it needs right now. Sergey says, did you hear about the terrible things in Bangladesh? Not just us, developing countries are having trouble. Yeah, I mean, of course developing countries are having trouble because many of them were exploited and have enormous amount of quote-unquote debt to some of these Western civilization countries, and then they are exporting all of their resources to pay off that debt, and then they don't have anything else left for themselves, and it's fucked up, man. So yeah, I didn't hear about that specifically, but the whole world is somewhat having a reckoning and in a crisis right now. And again, it's the earth. And Angela says, you're so right, Spencer. The earth is the true priority. Yeah, people in Bangladesh are earthlings. People in France are citizens of the earth. Americans are earth citizens. Canadians, whatever, we're all earth citizens. Okay, so again, that's our priority. Don says, Americans are not exactly notorious for taking care of family, really. Look at our elderly dumped into homes so that we can keep on making a buck, and children dumped into systems. You're not going to get an argument on that from me, Don. So it's okay to be critical. This is one of the freedoms that we are given as Americans, is the ability to be critical of not only our systems and each other, but our government. That's really what freedom of speech is, like the ability to criticize something without worrying that you're going to be locked up in prison. It's not like I get to say whatever hateful rhetoric I want to say. That's not what freedom of speech is, and that's a mistake that we tend to make sometimes too. Jennifer says, Turtle, my dad's Aquarius moon, born on a new moon, 81 years old, same as Biden. Oh, that's cool, Jennifer. So that's our full moon on Aquarius. Let's keep moving forward. Those are just some of my thoughts that this is bringing up, because I know this is going to be another pivotal moment in history. I do think that I don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of wild cards in this. The fact that we're trying to wrestle with the should we stay or should we go energy is very important. So not only are we seeing this play out in the global political sphere, but this could be true in our personal lives too. What are the beliefs that we are going to hold on to tightly? What are our positions of power are we going to try to hold on to tightly? And where do we need to step down and back off? That is what this full moon is all about. It says, where do we need to step down from our position that we're so feverishly defending? And where should we not do that? And that can change. It's okay that is fluid sometimes. I think that the mutable T-square says, y'all better be flexible. You need to have some fluidity in the way that you assess what is valuable and what isn't, or what is worth defending or what it isn't. On some degree, let's say that Joe Biden does decide to step aside. He would in that moment probably have decided that is what is best for the future of the country, if that is what is coming up in his brain. So who knows? We'll have to see it play out. But knowing that there is a lot of unpredictability built into this Aquarius full moon, I mean, it's squared Uranus. Like, that's the thing that we didn't even talk about, really. The whole moon itself is squaring Uranus. So definitely a volatile time. And I say that volatility just was one of great change. That's a harsh word. And we could also say it's only change, right? I think as human beings, we get frustrated with change sometimes, or lack of it. But I do think that if you look at things from a more longer term perspective, this too shall pass. Yes, these decisions are consequential, but humanity is a survivor species. And this is why I think that it's super important we focus on the survival of the species, because resiliency is really important. Political trends come and go. Humanity has endured over many, many, many thousands of years. Okay. I'm just kind of reading through the chat. We'll try to let's move forward. Let's go forward to the sun moving into Virgo shortly after this period of time. So here we're going to see this, changing, coming off of the pressure cooker moment, and we have the sun moving into Virgo, literally at the end of the Democratic National Convention in America, right? So we started at the full moon, and we end it when the sun moves into Virgo. And the sun will then be hosted by Mercury retrograde in Leo, and it'll be co-present with Venus. We'll have Venus coming into a square with Mars, and we have a different energy, a different type of experience that we're going through. So let's first take a stretch break, get a drink of water, and then we'll bring things home here with the final chapter of this. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you are so inclined and you want to make a donation to the work that I'm doing, you can buy a super chat in the YouTube, or you can buy me coffee at buymecoffee.com. Or if you want to support the channel and get a webinar, you can buy the webinar. Cancer or Leo Decans right now is on sale for 20%. Or reach out for a reading. I'm just getting a snack. Getting some blood sugar up so I can finish strong. Okay. One moment. All right, let's go back to the sun in Virgo. And here you see the decans of Virgo slide related to Virgo 1. And we're moving now into Pentacle territory. We've moved away from the suit of wands in the tarot, and we're moving into the Pentacle suit, which is associated with earth signs. So here we see an apprentice, sometimes considered of advanced age, working on their craft, working very hard on their craft, being very productive. So this could be a period of productivity. So themes of apprenticeship and focus. Learning the laws of incarnation. That's interesting. That comes from a daimon associated with this decan named Themis. So Themis was a goddess that came down to earth to teach humanity about the laws of incarnation and the limitations with it as well. So those could be some things that we're experiencing. Awareness of skills or lack thereof. We touched on this at the beginning of the show today, where we were discussing how the beginning of a sign sometimes shows us what we need to develop over the course of the sun's movement or a planet's movement through that particular sign. So here we see someone who is skillful. And so we may be aware of the skills that we don't have, that we have to work on to bring something to manifestation. Questioning and skepticism. This is an important one for Virgo 1. Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, loves to ask questions. It loves to destabilize. It loves to cast doubt on things. The Virgo questions are different than the Gemini ones. The Gemini questions tend to be, how can we explore new territory? The Virgo questions tend to be, how can we make this into something tangible that will sustain us through the winter and be passed on and to the next generation? So those are some of the themes we could be experiencing as well. So questions you could ask during this solar period. What is possible? What is realistic? What isn't? We may be going on some flights of fancy with Jupiter in Gemini, but how does that really fit into the practical structures of your life? What skills do I need to learn to manifest spirit into matter or form? Again, a really important theme with Virgo is taking a spiritual essence, an idea, a creative force, a harvest, and then putting it into material form to sustain it over time. How do I begin to sort through the harvest, right? Identifying flaws in systems is actually a really important part of Virgo energy. I know that sometimes people with Virgo tendencies can be frustrating to be around because they're so good at identifying flaws. I will say that that energy is really important. Sometimes we can just get backed up with clutter, whether they are ideas, physical things, etc. And you can never find a better friend than your Virgo friend to be like, to help you declutter your house or your closet or whatever, because they can be like, do you really need that? Nope, get rid of it. Nope, nope, nope. They're great at being like, nope, it's going. Like, if you're like, oh, you're sentimental about that? Nope, fuck it. It's going. It's got to go. And we need that because we can block more appropriate projects, things, relationships when we hang on too tightly to things that out of sentimental value or etc. What skills do I need to manifest spirit into matter or form? We talked about that. How do I begin to sort through the harvest? What are my gifts and what are my flaws? Again, it's equally important to identify things of value when we're in Virgo season rather than just focus on the flaws. It can be very easy with Virgo placements, and I understand this from experience, to get hyperfixated on what's wrong with something rather than what's good. And we can really be difficult people to be around because it's hard to find that satisfaction and peace with Virgo in the mix. Finally, how do I consolidate this abundance? Maybe you had a really abundant summer. Maybe you've been doing some really great work, but how do you preserve that for the future? Because not every period is abundant as the summer is. Let's say you planted a garden and you have 1 million tomatoes. Well, you can't eat all of those tomatoes before they start to spoil and go bad. So part of what Virgo season's all about is canning them up so that they will be able to be eaten in a season when things aren't growing. So how can you think about that metaphorically in your life too? Just because you have a lot of work right now doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that or something of that nature. Just because business is good, how can you set yourself up for success in the long term? Okay? So let's bring the chart back here. And just as we're seeing the sun moving into Virgo, that's when Venus is squaring Mars. So here's the Venus-Mars square. Now, these are different decans than we described with the mutable T-square. The third decan of Virgo is the legacy Virgo decan. That's the one that says, what are you passing on to the next generation and what are you returning to the earth? The problem with Venus in this decan is that Venus likes to keep things together. It likes to preserve, let's say, the metaphor I always use with this one is plastic surgery. You have a form that is aging, and we can choose to age gracefully, or we can try to hang on to our youthful beauty, and we can sometimes go too far with that, and it can really be a challenging experience, and we can end up doing the opposite of what we're attempting. We can become a grotesque version of our younger selves rather than just accepting who we are and what we look like in the moment. I love telling the story of my anxiety about losing my hair when it comes to Virgo 3. I believe that the Venus was at the maximum degree of like fall, around 27, 28 degrees Virgo. And I started getting this wild hair about making an oil that had saw palmetto and turmeric in it, that you'd put on your hair and you'd leave it on your hair, and it's supposed to stimulate hair growth through blood circulation, which that may be true, but I did it once. And for those of you who aren't unfamiliar with turmeric, it dyes everything it touches yellow. And it's really hard to get out of clothes or even on your skin, etc. And I was like, I did that for like one afternoon. I was like, this is not worth it. I will just accept whatever will be, will be. And as a Leo ascendant, sometimes we can get a little attached to our mains, but you can end up making something worse with Venus in Virgo 3, trying to hang on to something that just is ephemeral. Virgo 3 teaches us that every form is going to decay. It's a decan of entropy. And when we don't accept entropy in our lives, we have problems. So with Mars in the overcoming square to Venus, we are being forced with making a choice. We're being forced with saying you can't keep all of these options open anymore. You may have to accept the aging process. You may have to accept the entropy process. You can't put, I don't know if it's lipstick on a pig. That's really not the right metaphor, but you can't prop up I don't know. You can't take a gourd that is molding and put it on the dinner table and expect it to be your centerpiece. You know what I'm saying? Like that is the energy that we're seeing here. So this might be Mars saying it's time to make a choice. It's time to let go of one of these options in service of returning something to the earth and actually learning what is important to preserve and what isn't. So that's our Mars-Venus square. We move forward to the 24th. And then we have a sextile with Mars and Mercury retrograde. So after we've made that tough decision, potentially, we start to see Venus starting to separate. And now we have an idea about what we want to do moving forward. We have to be careful about getting too spicy with our communication with Mercury and Mars coming together. But as a sextile, we might just be very, very passionate about that choice and about moving forward under the auspices of our new reality that we have shown to be important through the letting go of the other option. When we get to the 25th, we have an out-of-bounds moon from the 25th to the 30th. So that Venus-Mars square could leave us with a little bit of a little tired, little emotional. I have Venus-Mars squared in my chart. Not super tight, but it's an opposite. I have Venus in Gemini, Mars in Virgo. And again, a lot of that energy is taking in information, integrating it into your life, and then letting it go. Taking in more information, integrating it into your life, then letting it go. I do this all the time with my astrology. I have the intake Gemini type of experience of looking at someone's chart or looking at the aspects of the month, writing down all the notes, expanding my awareness of all the different possibilities, and then I try to bring it to something practical and give advice and exhale that information to all of you at the live stream or in the reading. So there's that integration process that I think is super important when we have squares between those two planets. And it's not just one action and it's done. It's continuous. It's a repeatable process. So we get to the 26th, and we are seeing a square between the moon and the sun. So this is our last quarter moon. So let me circle that for you. So here's our last quarter moon. Okay. We have this happening in the first 3 degrees of Virgo with the sun, and Gemini in the first 3 degrees, this moon in the first 3 degrees of Gemini. So that particular area of Gemini leads to paralysis by analysis. So we may be getting so perfectionistic about our vision and seeing all the flaws that it freezes us a little bit. So I could see this being part of this story, is we're trying to let go of some things, but we're getting a little bit frozen in the process. So this is the tension between paring down versus expanding. But I often feel, though, that when we have a last quarter moon, we are trying to achieve something of the entire lunar cycle, right? So in this case, this is still the lunar cycle that began in Leo 2. So to be able to have that, achieve that final victory that we may desire. We have to know where to defend our ground and know when to stand back, right? That's what we had at the full moon. Previously in the first quarter, we have to identify which forms we're trying to prop up beyond their vitality lifespan. And then finally, here we have at the end of this cycle, which ideas do we need to let go of? Which options, again, do we need to let go of so that we can move forward into bringing these ideas into a body, infusing that essence into form? And then we'll have a new moon in Virgo, slightly after that. Not in this month, though. Okay. Let's keep going. We got it. Checking in with the comments here. Take care, painted turtle. Antique hunting. That sounds fun. That sounds like the perfect Cancerian activity. Have a good one. We'll see you. So finally, we have a few more things. We're getting to the end of our discussion about August here. But on the 27th, after the square from Venus to Mars, we have a trine to Uranus. And this is where we start seeing planets trining Uranus after all the squares. So this might be the time where we really realize that, you know what? We can't control nature and time. And we have to accept that we are here for a very short period of time. And humility in the face of nature again. And I think humility in the face of Father Time is another really important lesson. And to me, Venus-Uranus trined with Venus at the almost max degree of fall, I think it's just an acceptance of time on some level, and that we can't just keep everything together, that forces arise and then forces decay. I think that's some of the awareness that we're going to have with that. Maybe we start to integrate that a little bit better at this Venus-Uranus trine. And then, if that wasn't enough, Venus is opposing Neptune. Well, after we just had that realization with Uranus, then we might have a little bit of a nostalgic moment. A little bit of a, man, I wish it was different. Man, I wish this was, I wish we could hang on a little bit longer to this previous thing or whatever it was. But I will say this. The same day that this is happening, we have Mercury stationing direct. So we have a slow Mercury that's like starting to switch directions, right? And we're going to see this realization that, maybe we can't have everything that we wanted, or maybe we have to accept the reality of entropy and the passage of time, but things are about to get a lot better. And I think things get a lot better when Venus moves into Libra, because we're accepting the fact that we just can't keep going in the same way that we were before. And I think that's an important way to think about this energy. So if you look at the day forward, there is Venus moving into Libra. Okay, we have released our illusions, and now we're trying to find peace, trying to find balance. And trying to find fairness. And Venus is heading towards the south node, so there's also some letting go that might be happening through our Libra topic as well. Just as Venus moves into Libra, it does give us one more aspect for the month, and that is a trine with Pluto. So not only does Venus improve its dignity, moving out of its fall into its own domicile, but it starts to make a positive trine to a planet that speaks to collective values, that speaks to transformation and alchemy of our laws, our ideals, our shared reality that we have to agree upon to live in a society with one another. So that could be a really powerful moment as well. One of unity, potentially. And I think that I'm looking forward to this at the end of the month. And additionally, just as that is happening, Mercury emerges as a morning star. Okay. And that's a really powerful moment of phasis, an omen that speaks. So not only are we going to get this improvement in Venus's condition, but we're going to have Mercury stationing direct and then becoming visible again as the morning star. So we will understand a lot better what we need to do to move forward by the end of the month, even if we have chaos in the middle of it. So I think that is the way that I'm going to leave you with this particular astrological configuration. Let's talk a little bit about a hexagram. I'll take this off the screen here for a minute. We'll come back. So here is the hexagram for the month. This is hexagram number 38, which translates to oppression. Okay, it is let's see here. I've got a number of translations I can pull up for you. So this is oppression, opposition, estrangement, misunderstandings, differing points of view, polarity, diversity, creative tension. I mean, I'll tell you what, friends. Like, let's say that at that Democratic convention, Biden does step aside. There's not going to be instant agreement about the direction that people are going to go moving forward. I think it's going to be a lot of hand-wringing about what the right thing to do will be. And I think that this is, reflected in this hexagram. We have a changing line that says, isolated through opposition, one sees the other as a pig covered in mud, as a wagon full of demons. At first one draws the bow, and then one lays it aside. He does not seek to plunder, he seeks to marry. Going forward, one meets with rain, then good fortune comes. So this talks about, paranoia, right? And unrealistic fears, illusions. I mean, this is politics 101. You've got people that are mistrustful of each other, that are getting more and more polarized with rhetoric moving forward, especially in an election year. I've always feel extra stress in election years because the noise of our differences becomes so much louder and extreme. And a lot of the times, it's just noise, right? Like, people say all sorts of things that they don't even mean. Politicians make all sorts of promises that they never follow through on. They say all sorts of things just to please a certain part of their voting base, even if they don't believe it. So it's, I guess I would say, don't believe everything that you hear. Don't feel, well, I don't know. I can't tell you how to feel. People are allowed to feel how they're going to feel. But what I will say is that in moments of stress like this, try to assume positive intent if you can. This is something I always try to fall on the side of, is assuming positive intent. And I try to move forward off of being too paranoid about someone's intentions. And maybe that makes me naive or gullible, but I just, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I've been in situations with people that had very different beliefs than me, that I cared about very deeply. And I think that it's very important to understand that behind all of the Facebook posts, all the social media, Twitter rhetoric, posts, and weirdness is a human being. And I think that understanding that will get us through this difficult period of time. I know the internet really makes these things difficult sometimes because we can't see someone's face when they're talking. We can't see the effect that our words have on someone. And oftentimes in polite company, we wouldn't say half the shit that we say on the internet because we can actually see that our words hurt people. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're communicating, not only online, but I just hope that this set of experiences that we're having is able to plant the seed for treating one another with kindness. And like I said, maybe that's me being idealistic. but we'll see. So this hexagram is trying to encourage us not to get too paranoid about, people that we're interacting with, and really to also try to find common ground on some level. And it's changing to hexagram 54, which is called the marrying maiden, or subordination, playing a subordinate role, keeping in the background. This is something from like ancient Chinese culture, where they have very stratified and organized family structures. They had multiple marriages, and they were sort of ranked on some level. You had the original wife, and then you had like a second wife that was sort of like a concubine. And I'm not saying I'm in support of that model of marriage and family or whatever, but there are times in our life where this is teaching us that we aren't really completely in control of a situation, and we have to kind of subordinate some of our desires to kind of fit in. And I don't mean that in a way where we're compromising our integrity. It just means that there will be times where our own self does not come first, and we have to try to accept some of the situation. There's an acceptance that comes with this hexagram, and it's not fun. It can be absolutely galling to have to accept not coming first. But I do think it's a really good lesson in humility and in trying to make the best of a situation. And I think that we may not have everything that we want. We may not be the first wife, etc. We may not have the candidates that we want, or whatever. But we just have to, on some level, figure out the best that we can do with the situations that we have, so that we can move forward towards our goals, which, as I've stated, my own personal opinion, my goal is for a healthy planet. And whatever will get me closer to that is what I'm in support of. Because at the end of the day, I don't think anything else matters as much as that. Everything else is connected with that. There's synchronicity within that political ecosystem, but that should be paramount. And then the animal I have for you today, I have the woodpecker. And here we see a red-bellied woodpecker. It's sort of a misnomer because the head is red. But woodpeckers, they're really fascinating birds. They're really cool birds. We've seen them on the channel come up a few times before. But I think that woodpecker is about new rhythms. They drum with their head. They dig deeply into old wood. So woodpeckers can represent like something that we thought was completely dead and gone, being resurrected, like a project or something, breathing new life and new spirit into something, digging deep into an issue to find the abundance and sustenance within it. They also are rhythmic. So I always see a woodpecker when I'm trying to incorporate a new routine or a new kind of understanding into my life in a way that can be sustained over time. So recognize that sometimes things get worse before they get better. And I think that the August, I think, is going to show us that. Yes, there does seem to be a lot of tension, and potentially the tension that leads to some anxious moments in the middle of the month. But that is the nature of change. We have, like water, we will boil, we'll bubble up, and then it'll calm down. It'll heat up, and then it'll cool down. I think that this is kind of the experience we're going to be having. And maybe it doesn't cool down until after the election's over and things of that nature. But in our lives, we have to pace ourselves. And if you're continuously burning yourself out with anxiety over things that may be in your control on some tiny level, but may not be, it'll be very difficult to sustain that over time. So do what you can do in the moment. Take action when it is appropriate, but also take time to rest, to relax, to play, to appreciate, to find gratitude, to love each other rather than focus on the things that are tearing us apart. I mean, again, if you've been following along, I have people in my family that very vastly different political views than myself. And I'm a fairly liberal person, but I still love those people and I still care about them, and they're still family. And I think we should do everything in our power to try to meet people where, you know, where their humanity is. We can still disagree on these issues, but we can still meet them with dignity. And I hope that that's what you'll bring into August, and that you'll add some love out into the world rather than getting distracted by all the hate. So that's what I have for you all today. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I know that like I said, there's so many things that you could be doing with your time, and I appreciate you as an audience, as a community, as a group, as a support system. I really value, and I value my international friends as well. I try not to make this too American centric, although there's just a lot going on in our country right now, and it was worth discussing. But I know that, and I wish you well wherever you're at in the world as well. And I hope that we can all be responsible citizens of this planet together. So check me out over at spencermichaud.com, friends. Book a reading if you need to work through some of these extra challenges. I'd be happy to sit down and help you work through the personal things as well as the collective if those are challenges for you. And then go follow me over at Spencer Michaud on Instagram, on Twitter, on Threads, etc. And go check out some of the things I have posted there in my newsletter, etc. So that's what I've got for you today. Appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for hanging out today. Hang in there. We'll get through this. We will survive, right? Even if our backs are against the wall, maybe Gandalf will come over the hill and bring the riders of Rohan with him. So there's always that possibility, and we have to have faith in that, even if things look bleak. That's that Leo 3 heart, unbreakable will. So I hope that you all have an unbreakable will out there, but know how to do it in a balanced way. All right, my friends. So thank you so much for hanging out today. We got a few less comments. Thank you, Bonnie, for hanging out. Thanks, Tom, for hanging out, and we'll be in touch soon. And thank you so much, friends. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up too much during Virgo season. Be kind to other people, and we'll get through it together. Peace.